The latest update to No Man's Sky, Voyagers, brought some unbelievable mechanics to the game. You now get to build your own Corvette from the ground up, using different modules to build a completely unique and customizable Starship. Not only is it customizable on the outside, but you can also customize it inside as well, having refiners, mission radars, nutrition processors, and you can also decorate it out with all the decals you can possibly want. But this does bring some issues to the game in my opinion, and that is making other vehicles in the game completely obsolete. And I think that the Starships, the standard one-man Starships and the Exocraft and possibly the Freighter are definitely affected by this. You can basically have a base in your Corvette, your customizable Starship, which may mean that bases on planets. And whilst I think that this update is absolutely fantastic and I wouldn't change it for the world, I do think these things are going to need a bit of a refresh in order to make them at least palatable or useful again to the player. And whilst I still like the look and the feel of some of these Starships, there is going to be no need, I think, now for me to even consider using one over a Corvette. I'll hop in here and I do like it. It's very nice. I built this one myself. You can build a version of customizable single-seater Starships, is what I'm going to call them from now on, using different modules, but not in the same way you build your own custom Corvette. They're going to be less powerful and you cannot have a base on them like you can in your Corvette. All that refining, food processing, and even storage you get on your Corvette now completely outweighs any usefulness of a singular Starship. No matter how much I enjoy flying this thing around, it's not going to be as useful to me as the Corvette. You can get out of your Corvette whilst it is on autopilot or simply just hovering over a planet, and you can scan for materials whilst you stand in it. You can't really do that whilst you're in a singular Starship like this. You also can't spacewalk or have cargo storage in your Starship. This is like a mini freighter with all of the systems you can now have in here. I can even play music if I want to. All kinds of different things you can now create in your Corvette. You can have them so big with a maximum of 100 pieces that they just completely dwarf the singular Starship. And I honestly don't know how they're going to rectify that or what you could even use them for these days. Even early game, you can now grab yourself a Corvette and start building as long as you find the salvageable scrap from certain planets. The idea of just opening your hatch in your Corvette and stepping out into space or into the atmosphere of a planet is just undeniably refreshing for the game. They bring so much that the singular Starship is now just completely obsolete. Maybe these single cockpit Starships will still be a collector's item and players will look to collect all the different kinds, but there's so many expedition rewards now when it comes to Starships. I don't think you can actually fit them all into your Starship collection. You can only have about 18. So even though the Starborn Phoenix here, which was a special reward, is an absolutely fantastic looking Starship, there is no way I'm going to use this over the Corvette any longer. So there is going to be a little bit of an issue here when it comes to standard Starships like this and players actually choosing to use them or choosing to fight with them or even choosing to get them in the first place. The Exocraft are now even more obsolete than some suggest they already were. Some people don't even use the Exocraft at the moment, regardless of even having a Corvette or not. So it's going to be really difficult to understand how you go about incorporating these Exocraft into being a purposeful piece of planetary exploration equipment. Now, I love my roamer and I use it for having fun whilst wandering around a planet and collecting different materials. But some will just use their Corvette and they can even mine by standing at the back of their hatch and just floating on the surface, which may even cause problems with exploring a planetary surface in general. Now, I'm not saying that as a criticism. People will play the game as they please, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that at all. But I do think that Hello Games needs to find some way to incorporate both Starships and Exocraft as being an effective piece of equipment for you to use. But they should really start with the camera angle on some of these Exocraft. It is just way too hard to use. If you get too close, you cannot really use it effectively. Especially here in the Colossus, it is absolutely massive. And although the mining beams are really powerful compared to the standard one on your multi-tool, some people just don't find it really accessible or even optimal to use it, just simply because of how the camera angle works and looks, and how much of a distance you need to be to actually have the laser working. Now, what I'd like to see is actually them incorporating the Exocraft within the Corvette. Maybe you could have an Exocraft bay for your Corvette, a singular bay for each single Exocraft, which could then actually appear in the Corvette, and then you could almost drive it out of a Exocraft bay landing bay, and then you could go exploring on that planet. I think that would be really cool, but I still don't think many people would use these Exocraft a lot within game, even if that was an option. Two of the Exocraft I think that will be used more than the others, even though we do have the Corvette now, is the Nautilon and the Exomech, because these are the ones that can dive down deep into those water worlds that are 1000 U plus deep, that you can't really explore any other way. You can just hop out of these Exocraft and go down in your exosuit as well, but it just makes it a lot easier in the Nautilon, in my opinion, in these deep water worlds. They also have a function on them to use a high-powered radar sonar, which allows you to find different things. So the Nautilon, for example, sunken freighters, drowned ships, submerged buildings, that sort of thing, while the other Exocraft will look for other buildings on planetary surfaces. So I do still think there's some use for the Nautilon, and I think it would be really good if you had a Nautilon Exo Bay for your Exocraft. That way you could hover above the water, and then you could hop in your Exocraft, your Nautilon, and it would release into the water. I think that would just be a really cool little mechanical feature that you could use in your Corvette that would just make it a bit more usable to some people. I'm not suggesting that everybody will use it, because they won't, but there needs to be some sort of overhaul over the Exocraft and about how we can use them more. Maybe things like the Nautilon could be attached to the side and it could be released via some sort of crane or something on your Corvette. I think that would be really cool as well if you could do something like that. I'm just trying to think of ways to try and incorporate the Exocraft into the Corvette build to make them more appealing to people. That being said, again, you don't have to use Exocraft in No Man's Sky. They are a bit out on a limb, and I only really use them for the enjoyment of using them. If they made them a bit quicker, at least they seemed a bit quicker than you jetpacking across a planet, then maybe more people would use them as well. They did add a refining unit to the Colossus in a previous update, but in my opinion, it was not enough to make people use this Exocraft anymore. It didn't really pull people to it, and I still hear the same complaints I heard about this particular Exocraft from players in my comments, which is fair enough and completely understandable. This is a big old Exocraft, so I don't know if you could actually have this as a module in your Corvette. I think you'd need an absolutely massive Corvette for that to be a thing. The last one I want to talk about in this video is the freighter. Now, the freighters, along with the Exocraft, have been in the game for a very long time, and you've never been able to fly them. You can warp them to system using your galaxy map within your freighter, and you've got frigate expeditions, which you get living ship upgrades from if you use living frigates. You also have your fleet in here, and that's where you manage them from, and you have your Starship archive where you star starships that you have. So I've got a bunch of expedition reward starships in my Starship hangar, and then there are other ones here that I'm actually using at the moment, or not using because of my Corvette. But one thing that the freighter offers is this massive base space at the back. Now you can put a nice lovely base in your Corvette, but you can't get all the pieces available that you have in your freighter. So perhaps the freighters won't be as affected as, say, the Exocraft or the Starship. For example, there is this planetary probe here, which if we press will give us all the information about all the planets in that system, so we don't have to go and explore all of the planets on foot. There's also teleportation terminals in here. There's also refining. You've got storage as well. Yes, you have farming, and you have a bunch of other base parts which you cannot put in the Corvette at the moment. You do have stellar core extractions as well, which process different materials depending on which kind of system you are in, and then there's also refiners which you can get on your Corvette. But I just think that these offer much more still in terms of use, even if you have a Corvette, including even access to the galactic terminal. So I don't think these are going to be as affected, but I probably won't be coming back to my freighter as much as I would do now that I have a Corvette over a smaller Starship. So again, these are a little bit affected, not as affected, probably not as obsolete as the other two. But still, I think Hello Games is going to have to take into consideration how they use, or how players use, the freighters in the future, and whether the Corvettes are just going to absolutely destroy the freighters and make them completely as obsolete now as the Exocraft and the singular cockpit Starships are. So there you go, there is my ramble about what the Corvette has now made obsolete in No Man's Sky. And this is not a negative about the Corvettes. I absolutely love this update. I love building these Corvettes. I love playing around with them. I think they are an absolutely fantastic addition to the game. I just think that now that they are here, Hello Games has got some work to do in considering how they are going to ensure that things like the Exocraft and the Starships, especially the single-seater Starships, are still valuable in the game. The freighters, not quite as obsolete, still valuable in some ways, but they have certainly taken a hit due to these magnificent creations that we can now do. So let me know what you think. Have the Corvettes made the Exocraft, single-seater Starships, and the freighters obsolete now in No Man's Sky? Hopefully you've enjoyed the video. Hopefully I'll see you in the next one. Take care out there.